Yes, I was born around 1748 here in Williamsburg. Uh, I believed that all men are created equal, like the Declaration of Independence talked about. I believe the fact that uh, especially those denominations that had not been recognized for the longest time, the Baptists, Presbyterians, Methodists, Quakers, Dunkers, Lutherans, even Catholics, weren't recognized by the state church, but I believe they should have been recognized, and especially those coming here to liberate our souls, especially those Presbyterians who came 1742, and the Baptists that came 1750, and Methodists about 1765. They believed in equality in the eyes of God. And that message drew me to these denominations. And I believe that they were here not only to liberate our soul, but to offer us the type of Christianity that I think everyone should have had been offered. But of course, the established Church of England did not offer the same types of equality in the eyes of God, because they did not believe in equality in the eyes of God. So that's why I became a Baptist preacher. And it was easier for me to become a Baptist preacher because Baptists are very autonomous. They are very independent. Unfortunately, because of my being enslaved, I wasn't able to be a Presbyterian preacher or a Methodist preacher because I could not itinerate. That's part of the duties of these Presbyterians and Methodists. They would have to itinerate certain numbers of churches that they would have. But Baptists being very independent and being very autonomous, I was able to start my church in 1776. By the permission of my owner, Mrs. Jane Vobe, I was ordained in 1772, and the only ordained Negro preacher in this country of any denomination. And that, of course, sent a lot of conversations throughout the colonies of the fact that I, as a Negro preacher, will be ordained. I learned to read, I learned to write, even as a slave preacher. So that helped me to be able to keep books and also to read my Bible. And again, Mrs. Vobe is responsible for giving me my first Bible, my King James Bible, my Christmas box. Christmas boxes are normally given the 26th day of December, the day after Christmas that we do celebrate, or Christmas tide, I should say, that we do celebrate. And so King's Arms Tavern is where I reside for a long time. I spent many, many years in the tavern business. I know taverns quite well, but it was also taverns where I learned much about life and society. Taverns are like gazettes. It's like actually walking into one of the gazettes, which is ironically, next door of my neighbor is Mr. Alexander Purdy. He's the owner of the Virginia Gazette. And we did have something worked out that if I did hear things in the tavern, because everyone in this colony now state, that would come to the capital city, they would find themselves in one of the 15 taverns that would be here in Williamsburg, and especially the King's Arms Tavern and the Raleigh Tavern, Mr. Weatherburn's Tavern, Mrs. Christiana Campbell's Tavern. I say that because Mrs. Vobe and Mrs. Campbell are always competing with one another for clients to come to their taverns. But coming into the tavern, as I said, is like walking into the Virginia Gazette. I will hear many conversations in this tavern by some very powerful people. General George Washington will come to the tavern, Mr. Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Patrick Henry, James Madison, Mrs. Washington. And when she's traveling with Mr. Washington, she would come into the tavern, and of course, many of the very notable people here in this society would find themselves in the tavern, and that's why I knew so much. As a matter of fact, that's what some people would tell me. They said, Gowan, how did you learn about all this news? I said, well, I'm in a tavern. If you're born in a tavern, you know everything. And I do know everything. I mean, it's not much I don't know. And that's why I was able to learn much about society. It's just standing right in the rooms of the King's Arms and listening to the conversation of the people, and I would find out about these things very easily.